Stephen Wang has been a Rhodes Scholar, a Harvard-trained lawyer, a Gates Foundation-backed entrepreneur, and is now the CEO of one of Canada's most important youth entrepreneurship charities. He's also an immigrant kid who grew up in Cambridge, Ontario, and never forgot what it felt like to need a pathway in. Today, we're meeting in downtown Toronto at StartWell to hear his story. We'll talk about what Stephen is seeing on the ground when it comes to young Canadians and work, and why, in an age of AI and economic uncertainty, the mission of Venture for Canada has never felt more urgent. I'm Qasim Virjee, and this is the StartWell podcast. All right, Stephen, so we were just talking about you as a Canadian came here in the 90s from China, and the 90s was this era of possibility in Canada, right? You were saying 1998?
Yep. Yeah.
So tell me more.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. I mean, it's obviously not always easy. I still remember we first lived in Mississauga. My parents, when we first moved into a small condo, the place was just got, getting set up and the carpet was wet. So the first few nights we didn't have any furniture. We were sleeping on these wet carpets. And, I remember hearing my mom whispering to my dad, it's like, what was just kind of questioning, what are we doing?
What did we get ourselves into?
Can we make this work?
Is this really a better life?
Yeah, exactly. But I think we were quite fortunate. Both my parents were able to then find jobs. My dad in a millwright, and my mom at a kind of family-owned business that doing import-export and textile. And so both are small businesses that. Now I think about my journey coming back, coming back full circle, we're supporting. And so I think about that. I think about my experience growing up in elementary school in grade 5, grade 6, where, teachers, Mrs. Cunningham really believed in me. And, she's heard the principal say, giving out most improved award for one student in every grade. She's like, I want to do it for my own students. I'm going to give as many as I like. And I ended up getting a stack of them and just, still learning English, making little progress, but she put them onto the wall, and I take it home and I would stack them up, and just that little sense of confidence building and feeling included.
Yeah.
And then, moving to Cambridge, a small town, and, folks were so inclusive, and I started kind of growing out of that shy, immigrant Asian boy shell. Parents kind of nudged me sometimes, go play some street hockey with the kids. And I started going out, and then to high school, just having the guts in grade 10, decided to run for student council president.
Nice.
Did
you win?
I did win. Yeah. Did a whole campaign, and so, and then started a small student community group called Community Action by Youth. We're let's go tackle global action by local action. And so all these little steps where I felt because of Canada, I encouraged myself, my family to, kind of really feel we belong and can have a way to make the most of the opportunities that life presents itself. Yeah.
So when it came to going to university, where did you end up going, and what was the game plan at that point?
Right. It's interesting because I, there's a few different forks in the road. I was thinking about, was business school. It was I think Ivy and West Queens. And then there was at Waterloo Engineering. And then there was international relations at U of T at Trinity College. So very different paths. And sometimes you play those games. You're what if, I chose this one over that one, and how my life could have been different. But I was just kind of very curious about the world, and I think Canadians very much being a global citizen inherently, and
Agreed,
and at the time there's so much going on as well with after 9/11, Iraq War, all that, and so I said, okay, let me learn a bit about international relations, and that was a really fascinating experience because at U of T, through this program, I was able to actually go my first summer after first year. I did some development work in Kenya.
Cool. I used to live there.
In
1992, our family moved there from where we lived, from Calgary. We moved to Nairobi in 92.
Amazing.
And then I came to McGill in 98 after being in Nairobi for 6 years.
Right.
Wow, you went there. That's cool.
It was cool. Yeah. Western Province, got to do some really cool local, projects, and I've been in health centers and water wells and that kind of thing, and was there around the civil conflict between the Luos Kukuyus. Then did a summer at in Jerusalem at Hebrew University, studying about the Middle East history and
Crazy.
all this stuff going on there. Did exchange year in France at Sciences Po in Paris, and so yeah, really got to kind of take in the world in early days, and it was because I think part of that experience as an immigrant and coming to Canada, being so curious about the different cultures and all these divides that we're seeing in the world, and how do we try to transcend some of that. I think those started emerge in that importance of developing empathy, and but it was very much a search for, I think, for identity and purpose during that period of life.
And sorry, what was the first degree? It was international development?
International relations. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I went off to England and did my master's at Oxford in public policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you work in that field after that?
Well, I think in some ways I'd like to, see all this work related to these themes around, like, public service or helping society, helping humanity. I think the theme that I'm looking at now, through having done, as being a lawyer, being a working abroad in Asia, and teaching, so much of it is about enabling human potential and opportunity. And whether that's through institutions, whether that's through on the ground programs, whether that's through these macro forces, and how do we navigate that, whether it's through ideas. So I think, yeah, it's interesting because you look at all the different things that I do, it's like, it doesn't quite make sense, but in some ways they do come together in some way.
Yeah, of course. It's tough to draw a narrative, for the arc of your life when you're just in the moment doing things and applying yourself. Right. But wait, you said a whole lot there.
Yeah.
Really quickly.
Right.
And the things that stuck in my brain were being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Teaching in Asia.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, so you got a law degree at some point.
Yes,
so you've got lots of degrees.
I did.
How many degrees do you have?
Well, actually, just three. Three, yeah. And the funny story with
I'm not letting my mom watch this episode.
There are people with a lot more degrees, I'll have to say, but the last one is funny because I ended up deferring law school for 4 years, which was really unusual, and I was very fortunate they kept a spot. And this was at it was at Harvard, so I think for Asian parents it was particularly hard because they're like, oh, like, are you starting to hesitate? You don't want to go? What's going on? And this was me going out in Asia and China. I was doing nonprofit work, building a social enterprise to bring talent into the social sector, creating more meaningful careers for folks, building up philanthropy sector through talent. And so that was work I just kind of happened into, and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to go to law school. I don't know if it's, I didn't want to just kind of jump through hoops and all that. And so, but that was some tough conversation I remember with my parents, who are like, for that immigrant generation, like security,
that was success. Harvard,
right?
Harvard, top of the world. Yeah,
we
moved here for this.
Exactly.
This is about us, not you.
Exactly. And you sympathize, right? Like now I think about like how it is for parents and their journeys. Like it is such a different, and it's coming from a place of love. So I'm very grateful. But yeah, I think that was, those are moments when you start thinking about like, how do I think about these different sides of my identity and duties, as an individual, to myself, to my loved ones, to society and humanity, because sometimes they can be in tension.
Of course.
And then trying to figure out like what's the sequence. So basically it was 2 years in England, and then I deferred and then went out to Asia for 4 years. And then I eventually decided, okay, it was time to go to the States, and went to go to law school and then practiced in New York for a few years. Yeah.
When were you living in New York?
It was actually just as the pandemic wrapped up. So so it was kind of interesting, going there, and then city started coming back to life, and and very.
So this is recent, like the last few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Because I came back home to Toronto, to Canada, just about 2 years ago. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. So it's about a decade abroad, and then coming back full circle home now. So yeah, and I came back before the election happened in the States, so maybe it was quite prescient. But it's been so interesting reflecting on that, and I had to also kind of in some ways reintegrate. I mean, like a lot of Canadians abroad, the diaspora. This is a question I've been thinking a lot about as well. help them integrate back and make the most, and rebuilding a community, and then finding that sense of purpose. Because at the time I was still at a U.S. law firm, Paul Weiss, in Toronto. So it
Oh,
was a nice situation because it was U.S.
you moved
pay
back with a job.
with a job,
Okay.
and it was yeah, US, Wall Street pay and in USD. So it was a nice situation. But there was a turning point, which was the Trump decided to go after these law firms and universities, you recall, and Paul Weiss was one of the firms that was targeted.
Oh,
And and different firms, law firms, chose different paths. Some decided to try to fight in court, said this is not legal, constitutional. Others, unfortunately for Paul Weiss, they decided to settle, if you bend the knee, if you will, and just say, "We'll do whatever you want us to." And for many of us in the legal profession, this just felt like wasn't the, kind of the right decision for what the signal sent for the rule of law. And so you understand it maybe a bit from the business perspective, but as a profession, so that was one of the trigger moments for me. Was like, I knew I always wanted to do something more public oriented, wanted some more impactful, but that moment was like, okay, I need to start thinking about what's next, and how do I thinking about all the things that Canada enabled me, like how do I give back now. Got
hmm.
this like decade experience I can bring.
What kind of legal work were you doing?
I was doing corporate M&A work, so a lot of these private equity firms and tech firms, and some of it around uh like the tech firms around their AI policy regulation, which was really interesting. And the private equity firms, obviously, as you see, they're doing so much activity, and it's interesting. Now I'm on the other side with my work, well, what we're doing, entrepreneurship through acquisition, enabling a whole generation thinking about how to take over businesses that are where their owners are retiring. And like having seen the other side actually is helpful, because now we see the stakes, right? Because especially at this moment in Canada, like ideally we don't just have you know, American PE firms rolling up and buying everything and squeezing things out, and then local jobs and communities are affected. And so and so seeing the incentive structures, and then how do we enable a whole generation. We didn't think they could be business owners, entrepreneurs, that there's a huge business succession challenge. Three-quarters of folks are deciding to planning to exit in this
Mhm.
next decade, and who's going to take over? How do we keep it in Canadian communities in hands, and how do we provide more access to ownership and
Yeah.
and wealth? So that's partly, that experience has allowed me to think about the possibility of what kind of work we can do to provide pathways.
So you were back here, and then you left the law firm.
Yes, yeah,
And what in that period? It sounds like it wasn't long when you were thinking of this reintegration story, and
right,
and donning the, I don't know, donning the toque, shall
right,
we say?
yeah.
What? Yeah, what were the options available to you, and how did you end up with this organization that we'll dig into called Venture for Canada?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think that, you know, anytime when you're sort of making pivots in careers and things like that, there is a lot of angst. Those who are, you know, um, high achieving type folks, you always want like a sense of like, okay, I know what the next thing is, and like the clarity and certainty. But especially the world we're living now, like there is so much changing, and
Mhm.
we're fortunate position, right? Lots of education and networks that you can draw upon, but for a lot of folks, they don't necessarily have those. And so I'm very sympathetic to it. And that was partly what drew me as well to this work, because I have a younger sister, baby sister, Amanda. She's 12 years younger.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's very typical of Asian parents, like they'll have a kid later on when they move to a new country. And I'm very grateful because, we have this wonderful relationship as she's gotten older. But I just see that whole generation, what they've gone through with the pandemic, impact of social media and mental health, and all these different challenges. And
Mhm.
and now they're entering this really tough global and economic environment, economy. And I see now the challenges around the labor force in terms of like short term, both short term and then obviously longer term with these disruptions by AI. So yeah, with the youth unemployment, I was just like, she and her friends, right? They've been doing all the right things, right? Going to school, earning degrees, working hard, but there's not this many opportunities, right? And so I say we don't have a talent issue in Canada. Partly it's a experience and talent, a pathway, right? And creating, and so that really got me thinking. It was like, what are ways I can really do something tangible? Obviously I am interested in the world of ideas. That's why I teach at, U of T and Harvard, and I love policy discussion and international affairs. But it was like something concrete,
Mm.
because what people need, especially these young generations, not just big talk, big ideas, but like, what can we do now in this next year, 2 years, that can, right, focusing on enabling and unlocking that human potential. And and then Venture for Canada provided this really incredible, as a national nonprofit and charity that sits at the intersection of, education, industry, government, policy, and where you can really do concrete things and create new paths. So that was just very intriguing to me, and it's been a great fit.
What's the history of the organization?
Yeah, so it started by Scott Stirrett. Scott started it, is from Nova Scotia, went to Georgetown, and then he worked for a year or two at Goldman in New York, and then there was a venture for Canada, America, instead of Andrew Yang at the time, and so he may have drew some inspiration from those kind of models, but his idea was that we definitely need to develop more entrepreneurial thinking and skills in young Canadians. And so he did that for about 11 years. And so, really kudos to him, because he had the dedication and build it into this national platform. And, he himself now kind of becoming a sort of more broader portfolio of, writing. He published a book around uncertainty. And and he's like, time to pass on the baton, and but we still talk quite regularly. And I love that fact that I'm being the first post founder CEO, that he gives a lot of autonomy. It's like, this is all you now, you and the board. He's not even on the board. And so but I love that, like, energy. Like, we're just both young Canadians who are like, okay, we need to do something like this, and it's very mission impact driven.
Sure.
And been able to now deliver about 5,000 placements for students across the country every year, and so much happening too. Yeah.
So breakdown, like, Venture for Canada, what does it do?
Yeah. So the focus is, developing the entrepreneurial mindset, skills, and opportunities for young Canadians. And primarily we're focusing on post-secondary students and early career professionals, that segment. And when we define entrepreneurial, it's, it could be starting a business, but it could be, other forms of just being entrepreneurial with your career, or buying a business, or, especially as I think about this, where we're moving towards in the AI era, like the work is not going to be, the path is not so clear or linear, right? It's not like graduate, apply, and just, it's going to be a climb, and just going to be much more like explore, build, and adapt. You have to be able to navigate. So a lot of work we do, I would say, like 3 segments. One is for current students. We deliver about 5,000 placements for kind of like internships and co-ops and entrepreneurship, where they get placed at a startup or small medium-sized business. And in partnership with the federal government's ESDC, we play wage subsidy. So we match them with the organization. They get real hands-on experience for a few months, and we provide a lot of support and training. And there you see, like, a really interesting opportunity as we're thinking about, for example, how does our country become more AI literate, both about the opportunities and risks. There's an opportunity, because we have this national platform, to upskill the students with those entrepreneurial and business and AI skills, and then they can help small businesses as they get placed in there to help deploy responsible AI adoption strategies, right? So that's one segment. The second segment is around recent grads and thinking about how to give them that kind of a boost into this future economy. And we had this fellowship program, which was like a very intensive 2-year, and you place them at a fast growth startup company. And they spent 3 weeks in like Queen's Business School in Kingston, and really get a more bonding experience. And how we are evolving in that program is around, think of it as an academy. So we just did, at StartWell, this wonderful program on sales and AI pilot, and which was, 30 plus kind of recent grad around there. And they're like, okay, I'm trying to figure out my next steps, but I think AI could be useful as a boost. Sales would be very transferable, selling to
Oh,
everyone.
of
and
course.
and how do I combine that and to give me something practical that I can show employers? And what's great about this program is, we're partnering with, fast growing companies like Relay, and we're like actually concrete projects and portfolio that they can, once they go through our program, then they can show future employers like, I got these things I can do. And imagine you start building that up, and the way we see with that academy, then you can do it for sales, you could do it for marketing, you can do it for many other
Business units.
exactly. And then also one of the pilots we're growing out of that is something thinking around kind of solo venture. And so the idea that you can now, right, with just some AI tools, at least, not necessarily build a billion-dollar company, but even to make a meaningful livelihood as you're thinking about what the future work looks like. And
Right.
and then the third segment we have is this Entrepreneurs Through Acquisition, which is really thinking about this, business succession challenge. 3/4 of family-owned businesses are planning to retire. The kids don't want to take over, and how do we ensure that responsible intergenerational transfer of ownership?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that opportunity for those, I had one of our participants recently from the ETA. They're usually early mid-career professional. One of them is um, a young black man who is in Saskatchewan. It's like, I never thought I could be a business owner.
Oh, wow.
And so he went through our program, and now he's actively seeking on the search for, like, I'm going to go take over and help modernize a Canadian business, and ensure that it can be well preserved, and apply all the technology and things like that to make it thrive.
It's so interesting because I've been in, let's call it like startup land,
Yeah.
in and out of it in different
Yeah,
worlds
for decades.
for decades. And so many different hats, right? As a founder, as an investor, as an ecosystem partner when I was running IBM startup program, all this stuff. And I always keep trying to caution first-time founders about how difficult it is. Like, it's so
Yeah.
difficult to found a business,
Yeah.
and then develop the resilience that you need in order to commit to that business,
Right.
or business in general.
Totally.
And I agree with you that the world has changed in the last few years, where being able to have the skill set to fall back on or use, let's call it self-driven income generation capacity,
Yep.
is going to be pervasively useful
Yeah.
across our society, and so thinking of entrepreneurship as an alternative to a career is possibly no longer the same as it was 10, 20 years ago, or let's say a generation ago. Um, but one thing that is so rare, and that's why it's so exciting to hear that you guys have this formal program. One thing that's so rare to hear is people in those boots of the founder, instead of founding something new,
Yep.
applying the same ingenuity that they would to their company, but to something that's already off the ground, because then they could accelerate it like crazy if that's what they want to do,
Right.
off of solid financials. But I
Totally.
think a big question that I have, and
Yeah.
that keeps coming up when I talk to people about this idea, is they're like, how do we find a bubusiness?
Yep.
So I know this is part of the curriculum, right?
Right. Exactly.
But
Take our course. Yeah. Exactly.
spill the beans.
To extent I can, happy to share a little bit, but definitely encourage folks to look at the programs, and we have right now that's going to be open up in Montreal, and people across the country can attend, and we have more in the fall in Toronto, and virtual programs. So we
Cool.
have two programs. One is the 101, which is just like, to your point, like, do I even know if this is first of all, the right fit for me, and how does this landscape work?
Mhm.
And then we have the boot camp program, which is like, I'm ready to do it. What are the nuts and bolts, and how do I source the deals? Where do I go? And partly what we've been able to do at VFC is, as a trusted kind of convener and intermediary, bring a lot of the stakeholders together, like
Okay.
the leading players on the buy side and the sell side, because we're not just, one of those maybe brokers just trying to make a quick buck here, right? We want to be an ecosystem player, and
Mhm.
also advocate for the right policies, with government partners, to say, like, in the US, you have these like SBA and all these, loan incentives. Like, how do we increase that so it enables, folks to take bigger risks as well for that?
Mhm.
And so there are some of that work going on as well. But yeah, I agree. I think, there is a huge opportunity on the sales side too, for to do the education piece, and that's a longer term piece as well, as helping them to think more proactively about what that succession planning looks like, There's an organization, a startup called Succession AI. Our son, she's wonderful, and they're working on developing they put their information on this, AI system, and then they're helping them to figure out what the readiness, so that they're ready to go through. But there still, needs to be more intensive program to talk through and education. So we're exploring that piece of it as well. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to just kind of bring folks together on. We have a Buy in Canada conference in the fall, and bring folks into it, and a policy conference, and so those are the kind of things that we can do, because it does, I think, require efforts from all folks to build a whole. And I do sense that there is a sense of momentum, energy,
Mm.
and so part of it is just making people feel it's possible on both sides.
But is there like in Canada, is there a single source that people can go to see businesses for sale? Like, is
Right.
there a marketplace for this?
There
Who sells, like, who helps this traditionally?
there are some like websites and places, like I think like Village Wealth is one. I know Succession AI is doing some, and there's some other websites. And then I think that there's a lot of brokers who are kind of intermediaries.
Okay.
But obviously have to figure the right person, and so part of it is like knowing who to trust, right?
Mm.
And also things that are not available on the public platforms. And so that's why the relationship piece is key, and that's why we try, again, as a trusted intermediaries, try to bring all the people we think are who've really been tested over the years. Like, this kind of stuff has been going on for years, but it's now there's a vocabulary and there's a community that's growing around it, and how to learn and who to trust, and so that
But are there trends that you guys have found in terms of what specific industries might have more availability on market? Like,
right
if they're like, I would assume, okay, so skilled trades,
Yeah.
those sorts of businesses in construction,
Yeah.
Maintenance, like tactile kind of things.
right
There's probably that, like, family business
yeah
without the succession plan.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, at least from, anecdotally from me talking to people, you've got business owners that may not have been operators. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. When you have people thinking of themselves as investors, so people that own hotels
yeah
and maybe amalgam gas stations or multi-locational businesses like that they're not running it necessarily. They might have in their youth,
right
but then they set up structures to run it.
right
But they don't have that hand down plan to their family because they don't either trust their family
right
or they haven't brought their family into this operating model.
right
And it's an interesting time because when I talk to those sorts of people, they're stuck not knowing how to price their assets for sale because they never acquired them to sell.
yeah
They acquired them for the appreciation on the asset,
right
but not necessarily with the understanding of how to sell out of it,
right
And there's probably a lot of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that education piece is huge, right? Like, to really be able to sit down and get them to start thinking about, 'cause some people don't want to ask those questions. Understandable, like, these are hard questions about exits and succession planning, right? And also, I know folks who are thinking, interested in the employee ownership model. Like, how do you bring that into the conversation and think about, like, what are the different paths and who do you want to sell it to, right? And what does that mean for the future of your?
Sure.
Is it the economic piece you want to focus on, or is it other things
Right.
you want to
Or
prioritize?
is it the brand you want respected because it's got your name on the door?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so these are fundamental. And I think we need to have more conversations and stories about this and case studies. Right. And I think, and obviously AI could help with some of that in terms of the more technical stuff. Like, there are ways that you can gauge, like, are there certain, in terms of financial, legal, are there things is it more ready? Like, where do you need to beef up, to be ready to, but yeah, absolutely. I think the education piece is really important. Yeah.
Speaking of, let's take a step back and let's talk about youth in Canada and your lens on how they can be prepared to be more entrepreneurial.
Right. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this question. And I think there are four things that I think that we need to do, and which like Venture for Canada is trying to focus on, right?
Mm.
Like one is like the entrepreneurial mindset for sure, and that means like that, adaptiveness, the curiosity, the recognition of an opportunity and how you pursue after it, right? Then there is, I think, increasingly for sure, you need that AI, like just literacy, both about the opportunities of what it can unlock, um, and but then also the risks, right? And like the ethics, the privacy, the data, and all of that. And so you need to know both sides, because I think increasingly there's an expectation of companies who like want to see that. Third, then complement it. It's the human skills even more. I think in this area, like the human skills will matter more, and that's the judgment, the interpersonal skills, the communications and storytelling, because in some ways university isn't quite preparing this generation to show up with those skills ready on day one. And then the final thing is, I think, concrete pathways, right? Because like I think in this world that's going to be changing so quickly, no one quite knows what are specifically going to be the technical or other skills that's going to be needed, but what are the different paths that you could take, right? Whether it's starting a business, doing a solo venture, joining something, um, buying a business, right? And so I really do believe we need to kind of lay out a range of possibilities and then supporting them in that journey, whether it's doing a bit of career exploration to like understand what is the right potential fit for you, and then how you go about taking those first steps. And if we don't have those pathways, then I think even with the skills, like you're still, because now with this current job market, like it's a chicken and egg, right? If you don't have experience, you can't get a job, you can't get experience. So how do we give them sort of that boost to just get into it? Once they're on their way, I think, this generation is particularly entrepreneurial, and we just need to give them the confidence, risk taking.
Yeah, it's funny because in that seat just a week ago was AJ from Shift Canada.
Yes, yeah,
And so she was saying some of the same stuff that the work that she's trying to affect is trying to, I guess, prepare young Canadians to be more, what would you call it? Fearless.
Yeah.
Right? More fearless, less risk adverse.
Yeah.
And understand that failure is not something to be ashamed of or scared of, right? And there's some great work that they're doing, it seems like, at the school level, to get programming into schools.
Yeah.
And that being the prime to encourage entrepreneurship then, right?
Yeah.
Because real entrepreneurs don't understand what risk is.
Right.
Like, honestly, we take on risk that other people assess from outside as being really scary.
Right.
But from the inside, when you're running a business, when you're starting a business, when you're being entrepreneurial, the downside doesn't factor in, because you have the conviction of perspective that, is gained only by doing. I think that's my perspective on it.
Absolutely. And, I think there has been traditionally, we've been known as a culture relative to others, like in Silicon Valley, where we're a little more complacent, risk averse, just sort
in
of
Canada.
Exactly. A little more, maybe
a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more, you could say. And so, but given this moment in the world where we are seeing that need to be more, a little more elbows up, a little more self-reliant, I think it is a good moment to shock it, like a little bit in the system, like, hey, we can't just be coasting. And we do have so many natural assets, in terms of natural resources and human capital, that there's no reason why we, can't think bigger and how to encourage this generation to be bold, that we are one of the most educated populations in the world. We have all these endowments, and how do we really unlock that? And for Canada, I think it's also important because just given all the chaos, sadly, around the world and tragedies, like Canada, I do really see as a
bridge builder,
a light, a positive model. And we tend to be pretty humble about it, and that's a good thing. But there's an element complementing that with a sense of ambition. Like, and I do think it seems that, this government, prime minister is trying to lead in that sense as well. And so for young people, I feel like while there is a lot of, I think, challenges, and we have to acknowledge it, like, I think, you probably hear about stories of kids who are sitting in their parents' basement, they're like still job searching, not sure what to do. And
What do you think on that note,
yeah,
before we go past the challenges?
yeah,
What do you think the like top 3 challenges facing youth entering in the job market, let's say
right,
for the first time,
right,
this kind of like 20s, early 20s segment?
right.
What do you think the top 3 challenges to them are?
Yeah, great question. I think one is, I think there's a sense of like even not knowing a sense of themselves in terms of like, their place in the world, like what is their uh identity, what's their role that they can play, what strengths they have. So that bit of that self understanding in relative to this world that's changing very quickly.
Yeah.
And related to that is confidence too, right? In that sense of like self belief. The second is just like what are the opportunities, like in concrete ways, right? Like where if every job you're applying has like hundreds and thousands of people applying now with AI, like people applying even more on that end, and on the other end, employers are using AI to filter, like how do you even get through to have a chance to even sit in front and do an interview,
Right.
and so that's another huge one. And then I would say the third is really the human interpersonal skills that, again, because of COVID and the disconnection, isolation, they're showing up in a way that employers, and this partly a generational thing, but they're just feeling like, hey, are you really willing to hustle, do what it takes? Do you know how to tell, like, problem solve, tell a good story about, and all those I think weren't developed as much, and so they have the inherent. It's just sometimes it needs to be cultivated and brought out more, and so giving them that ability to unlock all the inherent things.
I think it's true, and it's an interesting thing because it's not necessarily new. We feel like it is because the impact has become quickly realized post-pandemic, right? That 4 or 5 years, 6 years of people coming into the workforce were kept really at home,
Yeah.
or came back to a broken office
Right.
culture. And perhaps that was always broken. And in Canada, I mean, let's face it, especially in Toronto, like the 9 to 5 culture
Right.
isn't necessarily conducive to, let's say, most people feeling a sense of culture at their workplace, right? It's more about cogs in the wheel and the whole like, honeycomb Bay Street mentality. It's not necessarily something that people who have been educated online to the global opportunities of entertainment, if nothing else, are feeling is realistic. And so that's also part of it, is the paradigm shift that's happened, I think, where we've moved away from mass media being broadcast based in the last decade, really, like this last decade, maybe a little bit longer, into being the on-demand entertainment and even on-demand education in some ways, which changes people's experience of apathy, maybe, whereby if they know what they want of it and they can't get it, and they're feeling that sense of poverty, that lack of opportunity, it's a very difficult thing.
That's a very interesting point, because I think in some ways back in the day, with actually some degree of friction, actually sometimes it was not a bad thing, because there's sorts of sources of effort and growth and developing of empathy. Whereas I think in a world where things can be more conveniently or perceived as conveniently reached and attained, that desire for instant gratification, the lack of patience, that sense of entitlement, perhaps on some, like, that could become more, apparent. And so how do we, right? So I've been thinking a lot about that question. It's like maybe having things so convenient is not necessarily always a good thing,
right?
And how do we reward those slower, more deliberate, the uncomfortable moments, the challenges, the stretches where that allows you to grow as a human, to be, and those points of friction and tensions and divides allow us to build those muscles of empathy and etc. So that is very interesting.
Yeah. And also, I have conversations regularly with tech founders specifically, who are of course racing a mile a minute, or at least in Canada they
Mm.
were until venture capital dried up. But that ethos of kind of like you have a million things to do as you scale quickly.
Right.
Culture becomes something you figure out down the road. Always, culture. I mean, in general, in business, is always
Right.
something that people don't really assess. And to be honest, no one even had the word in their job title until the pandemic.
Right. Right.
People and culture
Yep.
became this offshoot of HR
Yeah.
that only emerged in the last 5-6 years, right?
Right.
So it's very interesting that it's this kind of like new terroir for Canadian corporations to think of like, well, who are we and how do we develop a sense of belonging, and how do we co-share this or share in this common sense of momentum as well as a corporation?
Yeah.
How do we work together to affect whatever change we need to make?
Yeah.
And agree that that's what we're doing
Right.
before we agree on the tasks required of us,
Right.
So it's cool that like some people are starting to think of these things.
Right.
And I do think that dialogue is what the youth segment is looking to be engaged with.
Mm-hmm.
What's difficult for employers definitely is starting these conversations with the humility of taking opinions, even though those opinions might not be informed by experience.
Right.
And I see that to be the biggest friction point where we're talking about a lack of experience.
Right.
It's not the ability to learn the skills required to complete a functional task.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the soft skills.
Mm.
It's about how do you socialize your need for knowledge acquisition, and the question of whether workforces that are growing and need this talent have the cultural capacity to be able to onboard people in a way that feels like a sympathetic, or let's call it empathetic integration.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's a big thing that we need to develop in Canada, is like, it's not just the language of it, but it's about, an approach of how our companies can become more empathetic.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's like a brand thing.
Right.
That's like across the board with all stakeholders. Our companies need to grow and need to have heart.
Exactly.
And calculatively then need to understand how that manifests with this sort of a thing, talent acquisition.
Yep.
And even in the past, I would think, so I flip this around and say, of course, for anyone who's watching or listening that's not in Canada, you mentioned you were considering going to Waterloo, right? And so a lot of people across Canada think of Waterloo because it's got such a stellar record for engineering.
Yep.
But it also has this unique program. Maybe in Ontario, it's a unique thing. I don't know if it's just co-op.
Yep.
Which is work placement as part of your degree.
Yep.
Where you get paired with an employer.
Exactly.
And you do a real job for a few months.
Yep.
Before you graduate.
Yep.
And that can lead to a job after you graduate.
Yep.
Or otherwise, it's work experience that you could cite when you send out your resume.
Exactly.
So very successful program across the board, I would assume.
Yep.
So I got a couple of questions about that for you. On one hand, are you seeing Canadian post-secondary education, universities and so on, like institutions, adopting co-op across the board, across the country? And two, does this like mix of education at post-secondary and work experience, is that an opportunity for the evolution of our institutional frameworks in post-secondary?
Absolutely. Yeah. I do think there is a growing awareness that this, you need to incorporate it earlier on in your university curriculum, because, again, the demands of what the future, employers will require are starting to change, and it would change even more quickly. So the need for it, the two sides to be talking earlier, figuring out how to incorporate what the skills of the future are going to be needed into university now is great. And so I am seeing more of that. And again, some of the programming we do at Venture Canada is very much that working to integrated learning, right? 5,000 placements into startup SMEs, so current students can learn like how does it actually work on the ground, all the goods and bads of challenges of doing that. And we need more of it. Quite, frankly, we there's a huge demand for it, and there's a lot more need for placements there. And employers benefit from these great talent because they these young folks can do so much even while they're in school, and it's just incredible. And so yeah, and I think there's a lot more conversations that need to be had about what are going to be those skills that we need to cultivate in the future that combines the hard and soft skills. And then it takes a holistic, right? It's
Yeah.
like university, industry, government, civil society, all working together, because government here also has a key piece
Right.
to incentivize and create the funding support, so that we're not just, for example, building the big infrastructure and projects, but what about the human infrastructure, right? The human capital piece of it, and to create more of those pathways, because it's not obvious that how currently universities preparing them are, outside of certain programs, are going to be leading to an employment opportunity now. And at some point, I'm starting to hear some young people like, what's the point of going to university? Like, what's the worth of a bachelor's degree now? Right? When they can kind of have design their own approach or do something else. So it's rethinking the whole, right? The
Yeah.
whole ecosystem and path.
It's so interesting. We are at a very momentous time, but it's not, again, I think it's about what was a unique experience a couple decades ago and a unique opportunity for people who are young going to university is now no longer unique, which is an opportunity just not seen in that perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's seen ubiquitously as almost the opposite of an opportunity, where what I mean by that is very few people who get to university, or 20 years ago, especially coming from an Asian background,
Yeah.
were able to go to university and do whatever they want.
Right.
They were still answerable to their community, to their family, and all of this about performance at university, and also it ultimately yielding a career.
Yeah.
I remember, kind of railing against that. And personally, my journey at university was very much a process of discovery that was specifically like, a lot of this is like, I sound smart saying this in retrospect, right? At the time, I was just like relaxing and kind of like doing what seemed cool and chasing my interests. But that's a very important part of learning, is being able to utilize what the institution can provide, as well as the context of the institution. So for me, that means the city of Montreal that McGill is within, right? McGill's a bit stodgy and old school, and their programming was pretty crap in 1998. Like, I was very interested in computers. I toured the computer engineering and computer, what was it? They had basically a different program for hardware and for software at that time, which sounded so archaic. And both of them started by learning COBOL. And I was like, what about HTML? They didn't have a program for HTML in 1998. So it was very interesting that the university's approach to providing technology and technological education wasn't bleeding edge, because isn't that what technology is all about?
Right.
So I immediately saw that, and I said, okay, well, I need to find what this university can teach me that I can't learn anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that I can't learn by picking up a book.
Right.
So that's all I want to learn.
Yeah.
Which meant for me a double major in the arts in one was very cool, an interdisciplinary study. So I tied together all these random classes into a thesis.
Nice.
Which was about the evolution of digital music in urban contexts.
Very cool.
And then the second one was comparative religion, Hinduism, and Buddhism.
Wow.
And that was a great opportunity because the divinity school historically at McGill was excellent. Yeah. Like globally renowned. Yeah. And they had done a lot since the 70s to grow into Eastern religions. Right. And had a very interesting faculty and guest faculty coming that were Buddhist monks from the mountains and stuff. So it was a really cool time, but I do think that was a very unique experience for me to be able to choose my own path. Yeah. To then, self-assess in terms of whether I was on the right path, how I was doing, and what classes I should take each semester. Yeah. And then ultimately still be on the hook to have to figure out how to make money after that. Right. Right. And so that was really rare, but I see today more people needing to kind of go down that road. Right. It's now maybe inverted and the majority needs to, because I don't see secure career paths like perhaps back then existed, right?
Right.
Like even management faculty is how I started at McGill,
Mm-hmm.
and I transferred out of it. But at that time, they were preparing people for middle level manager roles.
Mm-hmm.
Like really weird to me, right? I came thinking it was business,
Right.
and I learned that they don't even know what business is. They just know about like maintaining the ship, you know?
Right.
It's like you're going to work at a public institution, public
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
and no one owns revenue because it just comes in somehow.
Yeah.
And it's just about making sure the lemmings don't fuck up too much.
Just greasing the wheels of commerce.
Woo! So
Yeah.
I think things are changing at the institutions. They
Right.
need to.
Yeah.
But I do think that like the pace of change that's being welcomed by organizations like Venture for Canada is certainly something that's reflective of the milieu that we're in, the availability of information that's there for anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's a lot of friction coming from that student side and the youth side. It's like, if you can learn anything today, that's great, but knowledge alone is not going to guarantee you a position at a company or the ability to monetize that knowledge.
Right. Right.
That bit of the story seems to be one that we as a society are poor at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And it could feel overwhelming, right? For a lot of these folks with just so much information coming at you. Like, where do you start? You know, who can you trust? Like, what's, you know, where and so if just finding, you know, I find like little communities or like-minded folks and organizations that you could just, you know, that could help you orient a little bit, guide some way forward, and accompany that journey is really important, because we're all going through these really, you know, disruptive times geopolitically, technologically together. So we're going to have to lean on each other more, and it's okay to be a little more vulnerable, to open up, but and don't be afraid of asking for help, if you know, and you know, as Canadians, I do think we're good natured and willing to help to the extent we can. And so I think there's a lot that needs to be done, but we're positioned, right, to of all many countries compared to like just relatively, we're like, if we aren't a beam of like a, you know, a beam of lights and hope, then I don't know about this world. So I have a belief.
I think here's the other thing that's a really positive opportunity in Canada that people need to understand. And it's something that has been lost in the last couple of decades, because I feel like, unfortunately, social media has robbed people of a feeling of geospecificity and geolocational relevance, right? Because the ad algorithms, funnily enough, like the history of digital marketing is such that it cannibalized traditional marketing, right? So traditional, like local newspapers with their local ads, because it's a store that you're going to shop, you know, at over there, went the way of the dodo, and everyone buys from Amazon, right? And so what the cultural impact of that is that, you know, everything people watch and engage with as media on their phone is disassociative from our urban context and from our physical reality and our national identity. So that's a really weird phenomenon that I'm seeing, where the ripple effects now are coming to fruition, where businesses can't use digital media to advertise effectively because it's not built for geospecificity. Even if you could target something to Toronto, the reliable numbers that the platform can push ads to is so low that it'll sell that ad space, but it's not going to deliver it. It'll just steal your money. And there are cases of this, like big ones, right? And Google's always paying penalties around the world to people who point fingers at their inefficiencies. But yeah, what does that mean for the youth and for people trying to find community to learn together? And I think the opportunity for me, when I take a step back, is to say, as Canada, it's a big landmass, right? We're a big country. But you pare it down to your own community, you know, speaking to the audience wherever they're watching, if they're in Canada, and you start looking around and you'll realize that like Toronto is the biggest city, and it's how many daytime population? 6 million maybe, if everyone's in the office. Realistically 4.5, 5. On the weekend, on a Sunday, like what's the population? It's like 3 million, 3.5. That's not that big relative to other places in the world. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people looking near to home to find community, and to find opportunities if it's about pathways to a job and stuff like this as well.
Absolutely.
So that's where the opportunity in Canada lies. We're a big landmass, but we're a small population.
Yeah.
And I think we remember that in winter more than we do in summer.
We do, yeah. Gotta huddle up, huddle up and yes, exactly. And I think ironical in this AI world that we're increasing into, that it is the things that make us human that I think is going to be much more durable. It's the human connections, it's the authenticity, it's the relationships and bonds and trust. Things are going to move really at the speed of trust, and that takes time to be built. And I can imagine like there's going to be a kind of a counter push against all this sort of move. Everything moves so quickly and instant. Just wanting to be more slow and deliberate and thoughtful, and focusing on the things that are much more organic.
I had this conversation with a development team this week that's developed a very cool tool. It's a scaffolding and orchestration layer, and kind of fun interface for all of these AI coding tools. So you can plug in all your various different tools, and it becomes a thing that coordinates the efforts of the coding tools like Claude Code and whatever else you're using. Because all those things don't, in their own right, they have version control in their own system, but it's subject to the interface. So it's going to lie to you and all these things. And so keeping track of the instructions that your agents are working on is difficult. And then coordinating if you're using multiple tools. So this is what they've built. And it's really funny because it for me was a light bulb moment when I saw what they built, because I was like, we are seriously at a very interesting point in, at least let's say, the history of software, because you can very easily create to the point where now people really need to be looking at what they can do with software,
right?
Which means we can apply software to everything, which is like opportunity all around.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe we've become very pessimistic since the pandemic, because everyone's like, you ask them about AI and they're kind of like, oh, it's going to take our jobs, and the robots are going to do the dishes for me. What will I do at home? I'll be bored. But at the same time, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities, like you said, to apply what I think are the cultural values of Canada to how we do business, and then work with the world, because now we can do so much virtually.
Yes. Exactly.
Right. And I also see there's tons of opportunity in our hospitality sector for global travelers and stuff.
Interesting.
And all sorts of opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's well said. So it's a great way to synthesize it all. And I think that trust that, again, coming back to when I was first started as a immigrant kid, like, growing up in a small town, has felt like, a real sense of like, oh, like you can belong and grow here and work hard, and there will be challenges, but there's something about our DNA that allows us to bring all this incredible diversity into something special that's also kind of different from what we see in the States or other places, that we should be incredibly proud of, and as you say, kind of harness more on the world stage, because that trusted name and brand that Canada represents, it's hard earned over generations, and something we can really lean into and build upon for the world we're headed into.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, man. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Such a pleasure. Yeah, great conversation.